What's up, everybody? My name is Reggie, and welcome back to my board game alphabet series where I will be selecting my favorite board game that begins with each letter of the alphabet. And today we are going to be picking from the letters K through R. So buckle up, here we go. Beginning with the letter K, we are going with the game Kingdomino, one of my favorite games of all time and really special to me, one that I talk about many times on Instagram and other places by Bruno Cathala. And it is really one that I touch on often because it is a personal gateway game for me. This is a game that really drew me into the hobby that we call modern board games because what ended up happening is I went to a board game cafe in Canada and it was placed in front of me as just a game a lot of people like. And when I started playing, it was interesting to me because I was expecting a board. You know, if you grew up like me playing Monopoly and Risk and even Clue, you know, there's usually a board that we are interacting with or moving on. And instead, in Kingdomino, there is just a center area of 4 domino style tiles that we are drafting from and creating our own kingdom in front of us and trying to get the highest scoring one. And so it is domino like in that you have to touch like with like, but instead of numbered pips 1 through 6, there are 6 different terrains. For example, forest or wheat fields or the lakes or whatever. And so you have to touch at least one of the similar ones and you get one center castle piece that is a wild one. And so it's really nice to be drafting against people to try to get the best tiles for you. But what's really exciting and what makes the game, you know, stand out over time is that wherever you draft, if you take the best tile, you're most likely going to pick last in the next round. Whereas if you sacrifice on a turn and take a tile that might not have the ever so important crowns, you will get first choice in the next round. And how the scoring works is that some tiles have crowns on them. And what you do is you multiply the number of crowns in a contiguous area of terrain by that number of tiles. And so you're trying to construct the most beautifully, aesthetically pleasing and highest scoring kingdom. It is a game that is really my comfort game, and I will bring it out and play it in person on a nice weeknight like last night. And also will love to introduce to new players who've never really played a modern board game, quote unquote. And that's why it will always remain high on my list and will always get a lot of respect from me, even though the letter K was a contentious letter with a lot of competition. For the letter L, it came down to 2 of my favorites, and the runner-up is going to be Living Forest. I just want to mention it because it's a great strategy game that won the Kennerspiel. I really love it for the multiple paths to victory. It also has beautiful, beautiful art and is a nice medium weight game that also has a push your luck mechanic where you're flipping these cards and trying not to bust. It's kind of like a blackjack mechanic. Great, great game. I love playing it on Board Game Arena. But the game that beat it out at number 1 for the letter L is Lords of Vegas. Now, this game has a lot more luck. It's by James Ernest and Mike Selinker. But what I like to joke around and say, it's what Monopoly wishes it was. And the reason I chose it over Living Forest, even though they're 2 of my favorite games, is that Lords of Vegas has a few more high highs. When things go right for you in Lords of Vegas, it is just so exciting and fun, and everybody is involved around the table. So like Monopoly, you know, you're buying property. There's a lot of money involved. You can take money from other people and earn money from other people. And it is always a great time. But the difference is where the strategy comes in is there are 5 different color casinos, and you actually know how many cards there are in the game for each casino. I think it's 9 exactly for each one. So you'll see them get flipped every turn, and if you've bought into that color, then you will earn money. So you can strategically choose which, or at least make an educated guess on which one has more flips in the future so you can make more money. And one caveat I will say about this game is my buddy has bought into the full deluxe version that comes in a beautiful briefcase I'll put on screen here for you. It has these awesome plain meeples and these beautiful poker chips. I had no idea that the main game doesn't have all of this in it already. It also has two very important expansions, one called Underworld that adds some cards to it, and one called Up, which adds the game to 6 players total. And that's usually what we play it at, is 6 players. So I would say try it with all of those things if you can, if you have somebody who's in it. But it is just always a blast when my friends and I get Lords of Vegas around. And every time you roll and it doesn't go well for you, you have to say, that's Vegas, baby. So that's Lords of Vegas for the letter L. On to the letter M. There are some great games that begin with the letter M, but I had to go with one of my favorite games ever, and I got a little hint by wearing this t-shirt here, Marvel Champions. So this is one of the campaign boxes, Mad Titan Shadow, just for kind of double alliteration there. But this game is amazing. And Fantasy Flight Games is the publisher. It is the successor to the Lord of the Rings, the card game, and Arkham Horror, the card game. And for me, you know, I am a big Marvel fan. I'm a big MCU fan, but also, I grew up on trading card games, so things like Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh!, really complex card games. This is a complex card game. It's called a living card game, though, and what you can do is it's a deck construction game. It has very similar gameplay to maybe something like a Magic the Gathering, but instead it is fully co-op, and you are going against like iconic villains that are actually difficult. So ones like Thanos or Rhino or Ultron, and it is 1 to 4 players against the villain every time. And it is really the only game that kind of pulls me away from solo video games. It's really the only game that I will sit down, set up, and play single player by myself and have a great time. It also has heaps and heaps of expansions that release every single quarter. So be warned, if you get into this, it is a rabbit hole that you will go down. I have managed to really kind of slow drip the Marvel Champions expansions. For me, I've bought a few hero packs and the one campaign box that's Thanos, but there's also a Spider-Man campaign box, X-Men it's a spam pain box, X-Men campaign box rather. Also the Rise of the Red Skull, so many villain packs as well. So it has a lot of content for you, and you can really just start with that core set. But really my favorite thing about it is that I can introduce it to my friends and play on an easier difficulty while we're working as a team, or I can add in all these different modular components to increase the difficulty, increase the scenarios, or add certain villains, or add certain cards to my hero decks. And at the same time, if you're really new and not into these types of games, you can just play a fully pre-built deck that will do all right for you. If the idea of like constructing your own deck is daunting, you can play the pre-builts and have a lot of success, and that I love about it. Huge community, something to get into, but again, be warned, there's a lot of content out there and your wallet might be sad if you get into Marvel Champions. Next up, for the letter N, I chose the game New York Zoo. Beautiful game with animals. Like I said, I love nature, and it is by Uwe Rosenberg. He is so famous in the board game sphere. People just call him Uwe, like he's Beyonce or something. But he is very prolific. Games like Agricola and Caverna and Bonanza, one of my favorites. Le Havre, the list goes on and on and on. But this game is a zoo-themed game where you're building enclosures on your own personal zoo mat, and you also are using these polyomino tiles to do that. Polyomino tiles are very Tetris-like, and they're big. Some of them are like 4, 5, 6, or 7 blocks in size. It's a complete race to fill your zoo completely, which is a little different than some polyomino games I have played, where there's more of a scoring mechanic. This is really, can you cover every single space as fast as possible? It's got a few mechanics I like in another game called Isle of Cats, but there is another game by Uwe Rosenberg that is polyomino that I prefer to New York Zoo, and I will talk about that later on in this very video. But the one thing that really draws me to New York Zoo are these animeeples. They're so cute. It's like flamingos, meerkats, penguins, foxes, and a few others. and you are putting them on these enclosures. And when you fill an enclosure by breeding your animals, Uwe is very obsessed with breeding animals in his games, then you are rewarded with these attraction tiles, and they are the smaller pieces, 1 square or 2 squares or 3 squares, that you can fill those little nooks and crannies that you aren't able to get with your big pieces. And lots of polyamorous games do this, and I think this is a really nice way to put that mechanic in. But it is a great game. Not my favorite polyomino game, but definitely wins the N category for me. That is New York Zoo. Onward to the letter O. I was actually lucky enough to play my first O game at Orca Con a couple of weeks ago here in Bellevue, Washington in the Pacific Northwest. Not too far of a drive for me. I brought one of my good buddies and we grabbed a couple 2-player games, and one of them was Odin's Ravens. Now, this is a beautiful game that it was re-implemented in 2016. I'm always keeping a close eye out for 2-player games because a lot of my gaming is with my wife and we play 2-player games. So I have a lot right here like Botnik and T for 2 and Jaipur, just to name a few that we play often. And I've always kept an eye on this one, and I think this is a sleeper hit for sure. What it is it's a straight up race game. And every single game you set out about 16, I think, landscape cards to make a track, and it is a 2-sided track, and almost Backgammon-like, if you've ever played that. We are racing to get our raven around and back to us in each direction, and you do that with these cards that match the terrain. Beautiful, beautiful landscape. It is very quick playing. I love the hand management and the choices you have when it comes to drawing, but I've really learned that I think managing your hand, kind of like in old school card games, or like I mentioned earlier, trading card games, is something that really appeals to me, is if how I can use cards on this turn and maybe save some better ones for the following turn, is why I think so many games have that as a mechanic. But in this one, it's a straight up race, and it would be pretty straightforward, except for they add these very unique Loki cards, which are add some treachery and the ability to manipulate your location on the track or your opponent, or even completely swap or move the terrain cards. And that is what I really like about it. It is very lightweight, actually the most lightweight on this list. I think a lot of people would enjoy this game, and the production itself, I really think, sends it over the top. Overall, it is a game that I think I will be adding to my collection very soon. A lovely, simple design by Thorsten Gimler. He's also famous for No Thanks, which was actually in contention for the previous letter N. Again, that is Odin's Ravens. Pressing forward to the letter P. I don't know if you can catch what I'm doing here. Pressing forward to the letter P, we're going with another Uwe Rosenberg game, another polyomino game, and another 2-player game, if you're catching on to that trend as well, and that is Patchwork. Beautiful, beautiful game. And just so simple. It is my wife's favorite game, and she destroys me in it almost every time. It's about 20-7 or something on board game stats, but I keep coming back for punishment. It is just so crunchy to try to get that puzzle and fill out your quilt. What you're doing is, on your turn, you are picking between 3 different patches in front of you, or choosing to just pass them on the track. And the patches for your quilt, they cost buttons and time, and the time is your marker moving forward on this spiral-like track. And so basically, whoever is able to fill your track more efficiently and spend just enough buttons and fill just enough spaces on your quilt is the winner. It has almost endless replayability. There's also a handful of different varieties, like an Americana edition and a Valentine's Day edition and the Halloween edition. And I think it is a classic that will go down in history with a lot of the amazing games that we all grew up with. And I recommend it to any couple or 2 people who would like to play. And I always enjoy Patchwork when we play it. Another game that has a great implementation on Board Game Arena, but there's nothing like putting it out on the table and building your quilt against a person that hopefully you care a lot about, or maybe even a stranger. So that's Patchwork. by Uwe Rosenberg. Quickly, we go to the letter Q, and I had a few games I would like to try at this letter, like Quest for El Dorado, or Quicks, or Quarto, but the only game that I have played that begins with the letter Q is Quacks of Quedlinberg. Now, this is a beloved game by Wolfgang Warsch. He has some other games under his belt, such as That's Pretty Clever, and Wavelength, one of my favorite party games, and The Mind. And one thing I'm gonna just admit here, I'm trying to be very honest on this channel from the very jump, and this is not my favorite game. I know. But the thing about Quacks is it is simply a game where you're pulling from your bag all these ingredients in kind of like a cauldron-like thing, and you can keep going and keep going, kind of push your luck, and you just don't want to bust. You don't want the cauldron to explode. And that's the core essence of the game, and I love that. I do think that Living Forest does this a little better, in my personal opinion, where what ends up happening is if you bust, or you pull too many cherry bombs is what they're called, then you only get to do one of two actions. You can either gain points or gain coins. You don't get to do both. If you don't bust, you get to do both, which is really cool. And I like that. In Living Forest, it's very similar, except for you get to take two actions instead of one if you bust. But I played this for the very first time at a board game cafe, pretty new in the hobby, definitely over a year ago, and so I am very open to trying this again, especially with some of the expansions. I know people in the community love it, but it still wins my Q spot, Quacks of Quedlinberg, just for the production of it, and I did have a good time with it, but it was not my favorite board game. But there's the victor for Q, Quacks of Quedlinberg. Moving right along to the letter R, I had a few great games on here, but they really were no match for my choice for the last game of this video, and that is Res Arcana, designed by Tom Lehman. I'm going to show you it right here. Beautiful, beautiful game. I just got the real copy for Christmas. So exciting. I played it about 10 or so times on Board Game Arena before I actually was able to get my own hands on it. Love it in person so much as well. He's very famous for Race for the Galaxy. That is the game that really put Tom Lehman on the map. And I loved this game from my Board Game Arena plays, but what really, won me over with this game was watching an awesome video by Candace Harris on Board Game Geek, and she interviewed the designer asking him about it, and just hearing about his passion for it and how he went about creating this game just got me so much more into it. There's a huge competitive community for this game. I like to play it a little more casually, but it is essentially a fantasy themed game where you are using unique mages to use these artifacts to collect and generate resources and gold, and use all of that to race to 10 victory points. And each turn, all you get to do is take one action or pass. So the turns are pretty snappy, and as the game goes on, you just you get to do more and more and more, and I love that about it as well. To be completely honest, Res Arcana just ticks a lot of boxes for me personally. It's a heavily card focused game. Fantasy theme, dragons and gold and dwarves and mermaids. It has variable player powers, hand management, and it plays in about 30 to 45 minutes. And for me, what really sends it over the top and why I love it so much, even though it might not be for everyone, is that it has so much replay value. Each turn you get 8 cards in your deck and a unique mage. You get to choose between 2. There are 2 great expansions. I've only gotten to play the one that's on Board Game Arena, the first one, but this game will probably be in my collection for a long time and probably be in my top 10 for a very long time. So that is Res Arcana. Thank you so much for sticking around and coming back for part 2 of my board game alphabet series. I really encourage you to reply to the pinned comment below and let me know what your picks for K through R are. K through R are. I had a difficult time with some of these, and I had a great time reading A through J last week. So please hit that subscribe button if you want to see part 3. Leave a like if you enjoyed this. I am trying to improve the quality every single week with the audio and video, and working on my video editing skills. I'm very excited to chat with you in the comments.